May I proceed?
You may.
Can you please introduce yourself to the court?
My name is Jesse Duran.
How old are you, Jesse?
I'm 15. I'm actually about to be a freshman at Torrey High School.
How are you related to this case?
Sydney Park was my best friend. We did almost everything together. And I was with her the day that she died on August 18th.
I'd like to talk a little bit more about your relationship with Sydney Park. How would you describe Sydney Park?
Sydney was a typical tomboy. She used to love running around outside, playing games with Nerf guns. She was the only girl I've ever met who liked Lord of the Rings more than Hannah Montana. I was always trying to act tougher and stronger than her, but I don't think I ever did.
What kind of things did you and Sydney do when you played together?
When we were really little, we liked, playing games like cops and robbers, shooting water guns and Nerf guns. By the time we turned about 10 though, Sydney mostly liked playing with video games.
What kind of video games did you and Sydney play with?
We mostly played first-person shooter games.
Jesse, could you describe a first-person shooter game for the court?
Yeah, of course. It's basically a game where you play through the eyes of a soldier.
How would you and Sydney play these games together?
Well, at first we played them the normal way. We would go through the campaigns and the regular missions, but eventually Sydney mostly wanted to play roulette.
What do you mean roulette?
Roulette was Sydney's favorite game. We would each have our own controller, and the characters would take turns shooting at each other. The characters would never actually die because the games didn't allow friendly fire or anything, but Sydney liked it a lot, so we played it when we could.
Jesse, where did you and Sydney play these games?
We played them at both my house and at Sydney's house.
Do you still play these kind of video games, Jesse?
No, not really. I'm not very interested in video games.
I'd like to bring your attention to August 17th, the day before the incident. Can you describe that day for the court?
Yeah, that day started out like any other day. I was hanging out with Sydney. We had plans to go to a water park in a couple of weeks. Except that on August 17th, Sydney found the combination to her parents' safe.
Jesse, did you know what was inside that safe?
Sydney told me that her parents kept a gun inside of the safe.
Did you ever see that gun?
Yeah, on August 17th, after Sydney opened up the safe. Excuse me, on August 18th.
Jesse, did you know that gun was kept?
Sydney told me that her parents kept the safe in their bedroom.
Now I'd like to talk about August 18th. How did that day begin?
I woke up a little bit earlier that day. I was excited. I couldn't really sleep very well.
Why were you excited?
Well, the day before, when Sydney found out the combination to the safe, we had made plans to open up the safe and see the gun.
Jesse, why were you excited to see a gun?
I mean, I was 11 years old. It was the middle of summer. There was almost nothing to do. Sydney and I were both pretty excited, I think.
What did you do after you woke up that morning?
Well, I played around on my phone for a little while. I searched. I was a big fan of LeBron when I was 11. I went on Reddit. I also researched a little bit about the gun.
Why would you research about the gun?
My dad had always told me that the only way to be safe around guns was to understand guns.
What did you do after you researched about the gun?
Well, probably around 9 a.m. that morning, I went over to Sydney's house.
Who was at Sydney's house when you arrived?
It was me and Sid and Mrs. Park.
Did anything happen after you arrived at the Park's house?
Yeah, maybe about 15 minutes later or so, Mrs. Park left, and it was just Sydney and I.
Jesse, has Mrs. Park ever left you and Sydney alone in their house before?
No, not that I could remember. August 18th was the first time. Sydney had a babysitter, Danny Brooks. I really liked Danny. He always played video games with us, and he always seemed to have a lot of fun.
Jesse, what if anything happened after Mrs. Park left you and Sydney home alone in their house?
Well, as soon as Mrs. Park walks out of the door, Sydney raced to her parents' office and shouted, "Let's go!"
What happened when you got to their office?
Sydney went to the file cabinet inside of the office, pulled open the drawer, and pulled out a file that said, "For emergencies only."
Was anything in that file?
When she opened it up, there was a sheet of paper with, I think, 6 numbers. And then Sydney looked at it and said, "Oh, I could have figured this out."
Jesse, did you ever find out what these 6 numbers meant?
Yeah. Eventually I found out that it was the combination to Sydney's parents' safe.
Did you and Sydney go to the safe after this?
Yeah, we did. I don't remember exactly who entered the combination, but I do remember that Sydney opened up the safe.
What did you see after Sydney opened up the safe?
Well, when Sydney was opening up the safe, I was kind of behind her, so I couldn't really see anything inside of the safe except for the gun.
Jesse, what did you do after you saw the gun in the safe?
The first thing I did was to open it up. I checked the cylinder to make sure that it wasn't loaded. And then Sydney and I took turns posing with it for a few minutes. And then I went into the living room.
What happened after you went to the living room, Jesse?
Well, it took Sydney a minute or two to get back. I'm not exactly sure what she was doing, but she had the gun with her. And as soon as I got to the living room, I wanted to play roulette on her PlayStation.
Did you and Sydney play roulette on the PlayStation?
No. As soon as I brought up the idea of roulette, Sydney looked at the gun and said, "Let's play it the real way."
How did you respond or react to Sydney saying, "Let's play it the real way"?
I wasn't really sure what she meant, so I asked her. She nodded towards her parents' gun.
What did you think she meant?
I thought that she meant that we should play roulette with the real gun. You know, actually taking the gun and pointing it at each other and actually pulling the trigger.
How did you respond to Sydney nodding towards the gun?
Well, I asked her what the rules were. She looked at me and she said, "We each get 1 shot. I take the gun, I aim it at you, I pull the trigger. Then you take the gun, you aim it at me, and you pull the trigger."
Jesse, did you play this real-life roulette with Sydney Park on August 18th?
Yeah. Sydney went first. She picked up the gun, opened up the cylinder, closed it, aimed it at my head, pointed, and fired. Except that it didn't fire. All I heard was a click, and then Sydney set the gun on the coffee table.
Did Sydney do anything else when she set the gun down on the coffee table?
Yeah. She slid it towards me.
What did you do?
I picked the gun up. I was just trying to do what Sydney had. I opened up the cylinder, spun it, and closed it. And I pointed it at Sydney, and I pulled the trigger. And the gun was so loud, and it sent me backwards. All I remember was how much my ears hurt. And then I looked over at Sydney.
What did you see?
All I saw was blood. And then all I could do was stare at the gun. And then I started to cry.
Thank you. No further questions at this time.
Cross-examination.
Yes, sir. May I inquire?
You may.
Jesse, I know this may be hard to recall, but if you need a moment, just let me know.
Thank you.
A week before August 18th, you recall getting a cell phone for the first time, correct?
Yeah, I got a smartphone about a week before, that's right.
And on August 18th, you remember texting Sydney in the morning, correct?
Yeah, I did. Sydney and I texted all the time.
If I were to show you these text messages, would you remember them?
I would, yes.
I'm approaching opposing counsel of the plaintiffs too. Permission to approach the witness with the same. Jesse, I just handed you a screen capture that Officer Dale Williams took on August 18, 2010, correct?
Yes.
And the messages on the right in blue are your text messages, correct?
Yeah, I sent these the morning of August 18th.
And on the left, they have messages from Sydney.
Objection, lack of foundation.
Your Honor, I'm establishing this foundation.
What's your specific issue?
I'm objecting as to how we could possibly know the messages on the left were sent by Sydney Park. Lack of personal knowledge would be the amendment to that objection, Your Honor.
Okay, so you're asserting that this witness cannot say with any degree of certainty whether the person sending text messages from Sydney's phone was in fact Sydney.
Yes, Your Honor.
I'll instruct the jury about that we can't ascertain perfectly who it was, but I'm gonna have that go to weight rather than admissibility, so overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
So at the top of the phone, where it would say who the contact was, it says Sydney, correct?
Yeah.
At this time, Your Honor, plaintiff moves to admit plaintiff's to the evidence.
Objection, here's as the statements by Sydney Park or whoever made those statements.
May I respond?
Okay.
Your Honor, under Rule 801D2B, because this is his phone and he has accepted those messages to who he believed to be Sydney, he has adopted them to be true and thus would not qualify as hearsay as party opponent. Or not party opponent, does not qualify as hearsay.
Your Honor, can I respond on those grounds?
Sure.
I'm objecting to the statements made by Sydney Park in this statement, as they are not an exception under 802DB, and this is not acceptable as admissible.
Yeah, what you're asserting, that's not how 802
I was
DB
referring
works.
to Sydney's statements when he received the messages from Sydney. He adopted them to be true, else he would not have responded.
That's not what adopting means in that rule. If so, anything you rely on becomes your statement, and that's not correct.
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you have any other grounds?
May I refer to co-counsel?
Sure.
Your Honor, we ask that there be a constructing judgment made that only like to elicit the statements made by Jesse Duran in the evidence, not Sydney Parks.
And I object to the document being entered in its entirety. Entering the document to the jury means the jury has a chance to see the statements made by Sydney Park. And that's not allowed under the rules in today's trial.
Okay, so what are you proposing exactly?
We
A
just
redacted
simply
copy?
instruct the jury to only look for Jesse's statements and what they mean from Jesse.
Jesse.
Copy.
What?
Redacted.
Yeah, I believe that's probably the best way to do it. Okay, yeah, so we're gonna admit a redacted copy
Yes, Your
that only reflects the statements made by Jesse, not the responses by Sydney. So don't inquire either verbally or reference any statements by Sydney contained in that document. Continue.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, around 7 o'clock, you asked Sydney if she was up, correct?
Yep, I answered a couple times.
And after a couple hours, you then texted Sydney saying, I can't wait to see it. The combination is in for emergencies only, correct?
Yes.
Permission to retrieve evidence?
You may.
Jesse, I would like to move back to when you were in the 5th grade. During that time, you had a project instructed by your teacher to draw a picture, correct?
Yeah, I think the one you're referring to is when she asked us to draw an adventure story.
And would you recognize that picture after I showed you in here for today?
Yes, I definitely would.
Permission to approach opposing counsel with states 3. Permission to approach the witness in turn.
You may.
Jesse, I just handed you a copy of the project your teacher asked you to draw, correct?
Yeah, when she asked us to draw an adventure story.
And this is a fair and accurate copy of when you drew it back in the 5th grade?
Yeah, I think so.
State moves to admit states 3.
Objection, substantially seems more prejudicial than probative, Your Honor.
Okay, first of all, show me what we're about to discuss.
This is the states 3.
Okay, okay, grounds.
I object on 2 grounds, Your Honor. First off, substantially more prejudicial than probative. This offers little to no probative value in today's case, whereas it will serve to severely prejudice the jury against my client. Second off, this is improper character evidence used to show that because Jesse made a violent cartoon, he was more inclined to act violently on August 18, 2010.
Response.
On the grounds of more prejudicial than probative, Your Honor, we're using this, on the grounds of more probative, we're only simply using this to ascertain Jesse's interest in guns, and we're not using it to bias the jury. And at that point, it would go more to weight than admissibility. On the grounds of character evidence, acting in conformity with that character, we're using it to show knowledge that Jesse had an interest in guns.
Your Honor, if I respond to those grounds, whether or not opposing counsel is attempting to use this document to show that Jesse had an interest in guns does not make it less prejudicial than probative. In fact, the majority of this document is served to prejudice the jury against my client, and they've already shown my client, Jesse Duran, has an interest in guns. This is merely more prejudicial than probative.
Yeah, can we link this in any way to Jesse's parents? Can we show that they knew about this or this influenced their understanding?
Yes, I can establish that foundation.
Okay, because I mean, generally speaking, we actually don't care all that much about whether he was interested in guns or not, unless we can go up the chain and show what the parents knew, because that's what
Yes,
affects
Your Honor.
your case. So I'm going to let you try and lay that foundation to show how this affected, or influenced his parents, and then I'm going to withhold my ruling until that foundation's been laid.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Jesse, when you drew this picture, you brought it home to your father, Peyton Duran, correct?
Yeah, my dad was not happy when I showed him this drawing.
Even though your father was not happy, he still put it on the fridge, correct?
I'm not sure about that, but I know that he told me that guns were very dangerous, and we had a long discussion about guns.
So you're testifying that Peyton Duran did not put this on the fridge?
Yes, that's my testimony.
Permission to retrieve evidence from the witness?
You may.
Now, on August 18th, after the incident with Sydney, someone approached you in the house, correct?
Yes, that's true.
And this person was Terry Chapman, your neighbor.
Yeah, I didn't really know Terry that well, but he approached me that morning.
When Terry approached you, you told Terry that you shot Sydney, correct?
Yeah, I did.
And to your knowledge, Sydney was dead at the time?
I wasn't really sure what had happened to me. I just saw the blood.
Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor, I just really ask for clarification purposes as to whether or not the plaintiff exhibit 3
Oh,
was included
yes,
in evidence.
yes, it's being admitted. It was shown that the father knew about it. So-
Permission to the publish to the jury now.
Yes. Granted. You may step down.
Thank you.
Your Honor, at this time, defense rests this case in chief, and we ask for a brief recess.
Yeah, 5 minutes before closes. Oh, actually, okay. Yeah, 5, 10 minutes, something like that, you'll come back.
Thank you, Your Honor.